Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, The High Feature. I'm sitting here with my good friend, brother Puma.
Hello.
It's a new day and we're gonna take off where we left.
Yeah, from the last discussion we had
Yeah,
previous.
yeah. I think one of the things you wanted me to expand more on is the science fiction as urban mythology, predictive programming, and
Yeah,
things like that, and what that is.
yeah. I think it will really be beneficial if we get to know like
Okay,
what they are trying to relay because
okay.
most of them we see repetitive storylines, even
Mm-hmm.
though the storyboard is in there's a little bit of shift in
Yeah.
the character and the story, but I feel the message they're trying to pass across is quite similar. So
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we can start with like predictive programming. An excellent example is Star Trek from the 1960s, right?
mhm.
There's other books that were done in earlier fictions in the 1950s, like Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, and the I, like the iPhone. And now
Yeah,
we're seeing a very similar technology being put out by uh, Tesla, right? So the concept is to uh, introduce technologies,
mm.
concepts, and behaviors as fiction to an audience, maybe
Okay.
30, 40 years in advance of the eventual technological rollout. It's sort of like front loading, right? Or seeding the minds and the consciousness of the people and
Yeah.
then preparing them for a probable future where they're then going to be uh, sort of doing that. Like, example being in the 1960s, there was no real wireless communicators,
Mm,
right? There wasn't handheld computers,
mm,
you know. But then in the 1990s, they introduced the cell phone. So the people that are, the younger generations, Generation X, the tail end of the baby boomers, are still youthful enough where they're watching these shows, they're talking about it, they're saying, "Oh, did you see that?" The Jetsons,
mm.
the the cartoon is another
Yeah.
example, right? Where they have robots helping people, levitating cars, and then all of that is putting it into the minds of people for multiple reasons to
To
get,
expect something like that.
yeah, to get them on a creative path.
Mm,
So you'll have people thinking like this and then inventing technologies, and then you're ultimately already in possession of these technologies in the secret military programs, like
mm,
Germany and America, and what they were working on in World War II in secret, and Russia as well, uh, was some fairly highly advanced technologies, and they were achieving things that were like beyond our imagination.
mm.
Uh, but to make it within the imagination, they put it forward as science fiction, right? And then you have the comic books doing that as well, with Marvel Comics coming onto the scene
Yeah.
after World War II, the introduction of the flying saucers, and then all the UFO sightings that were occurring after the war. And then amongst the servicemen, they were reporting seeing these things as well.
Mm,
And they were ultimately human based and pertaining to extraterrestrials, right? So there was sort of a marriage between the two. And then to prepare the population for this rollout, they're showing it to you as science fiction,
mm.
right?
Okay. So, can you give us some examples of, science fiction movies that you want to talk about, like the meaning behind the technologies we can find in those movies? I think Lord of the Ring, even though it's of
Fantasy,
yeah
but it's
fantasy,
the
but
same thing. And
it still has some,
Lord of the
messages.
Rings is a great one because you have the Ring of Power. So
Mm,
that could be a symbolism of a lot of different things. I like to think about it of the capacity for human ascension, ultimately, even though it's done evil, right? The Ring of Power is the corruptor,
yeah.
right? But
One
then
ring to rule the others.
to rule the others, right? So there's like you deceive everybody into taking a ring,
Mm,
and then it's there to rule the others, and they're showing you the elves, right? And then the word elf, ALEF, comes from British tradition, and
Okay.
it was assigned to the nobles. So you'd be Ethelfred, right? A name which means the noble Fred, right? And you also have in that the
The
orcs.
orcs.
Yeah, and they're a group of fallen elves,
Mm.
right? So that correlates to some of the myths of antiquity because you have the Jedi, right? And Egyptian priesthood that ultimately falls to the dark side,
Mm.
right? Because their failed chosen one, Osiris, uh, ultimately loses his battle to Set and then causes a great precipitation of events that ultimately lead us to the moment we're in now. And then that same iconography, so Osiris is also Matsya and Thor in these religions and myths. So the thing that links them up is their position as one of the first avatars, but then the weapon. So you have the Djed,
Mm-hmm.
right, which is consciousness matrixy technology.
Mm.
You have the Kamudaki, right? So Osiris wields the Djed, and Ba, the symbol for Benebdejed, right, is the ram. And Benebdejed means the Ba of the Lord of Djed. So the Lord of Djed is the guy who can wield this consciousness matrixy technology. And that consciousness matrixy technology is also depicted in the Norse mythology with Thor,
Thor, this
right?
hammer.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
Thor is ultimately the one that precipitates out the events of Ragnarok,
Mm.
right? And then Anakin becomes Darth Vader, the failed chosen one,
Yeah.
and destroys the Republic because he's manipulated by the Sith Lord. The Sith Lord is this man, is the apex being on top of this dark side of the Force, right? So you're dealing with these religious themes that are very intrinsic to our own existence because it's like we're dealing with an emotional inheritance, right? So because these are the what has happened in vast antiquity,
Okay.
right? When we see it in the science fiction in these movies, we're automatically attracted to it because they're using these archetypes, these spiritual symbols, and then connected to a real history without letting you know what that is
Yeah.
as a form of magic to manipulate you and then make money, right? Because that's
Yeah.
what they're doing on it.
Yeah.
So you have Anakin, the failed chosen one, Thor, the failed chosen one, right? In the
Similarities.
yeah. And then they used the actress Natalie Portman, right? So Natalie Portman plays Darth Vader's girl, and then she plays Thor's girl. And then that's how like organized this is, that the highest level of the mystery school, the secret society, the dark elitism is this information, right? And then ultimately it's playing a form of like a soft disclosure, right? And magic. So that's why they call it movie magic. And then Hollywood, right? The Hollywood is the Druid's wand. And the Druid's wand are connected to the Germanic secret societies, right?
Okay.
And then those secret societies in the Vril Society and the Thule Society were involved with using remote viewers and psychic mediums to connect with otherworldly intelligences to help create anti-gravity technologies, right? And that correlates to the German secret space programs and the American secret space programs, and then the bloodlines, and then they're all connected to the beings in the religions, like the fallen, right? The watchers, the ones that were tasked with watching the experiment, right?
Yeah.
So we see that, but then they're showing you these technologies, which means the potential for us to bring them into the forefront of our civilization exists, right? So instantaneous travel with things like jump pads, right, where you can go stand on a platform and flip, you jump to the other side of the earth in an instant.
That's like teleportation.
A form of teleportation for sure. And the ability like to have this would
Yeah.
immediately nullify all air travel, transport, because think about the way we could move goods around, free energy to everyone, and then replicator technology where you're like able to punch in what you want and then get food. Imagine replicator technologies being administered to Nigeria and free energy, so there's no more rolling blackouts, no more dirty water, and abundance of food easily available to people, right? So you're immediately nixing suffering just like that.
So if we come to the artificial intelligence, the first movie of Terminator that was acted, we didn't have much of the artificial intelligence in play. But right now, I think we're having more of that with robots who have even emotional abilities. Yeah, like I was scrolling on Instagram the other day and I came across I think that it was a Chinese robot, and the manufacturers of this robot has made the robots to be so sensitive. It could react in a certain way when it feels hot, to feel happy and to feel sad. And I think that's something that should be alarming.
A level of sentience that's present, but how is this technology working inside the grand creator's field, right? Is there a mechanism to connect it to it and work it within the creator's aim and intent and keep it as a benevolent technology? Right? So in order to do that, you have to have full disclosure, because that's ultimately what Satan is. Right? Satan is an electromagnetic energy that comes from a dark dimension that lives in technology, and it can affect people, like organize the molecules in your brain, the metals in somebody's body, to make little nano machines, right? To influence them on a path over hundreds of years to then start building these technologies, right? That's in a certain instance of what it's capable of. On Earth, it's different because we have these benevolent forces that are at play. But ultimately, what does it say in the religions? That Satan will come to rule the earth, right? So you have these AIs that are being built. They're all appear as though they're different, separate, and in competition. But most likely, they're slaved already by this evil force, right? And it's just working together to culminate itself to its height, right? But the way the creator is always in control is that this experiment is taking place in a star system that has a reoccurring solar micronova. So this energy that will be emitted from the sun is a waveform that is totally destructive to these energies and these cellular fields. So if you're not of a certain vibration, when this passes through, away you go, right? And away all this technology does. So that's the fail-safe the creator has brought. And then that's what Satan is. Satan is the consequence of bad behavior, the worst possible scenario, but exists as a teacher from the creator. And it's brought into our galaxy and our local galactic cluster in the universe on Earth at the Garden of Eden. And that's where the failed chosen one did this at the end of this cycle 24,500 years ago. They opened this portal. This waveform was allowed in. The solar micronova went down, but because of all of these cellular entanglements, these fields, right, there was places where it could stay habitating on the earth, so it comes up and takes over people and then leads us along a path until we're here. And now we're at the culmination of the darkest point in the cycle, and we're facing another annihilation sequence. And when this waveform comes through, it's going to finish the job. And then the cellular knot wants to be untied. But then that's how the benevolent beings brought their soul in to incarnate. And that's the soul of the Ba of the Lord of the Jed, and then depicted as the ram in Egypt. But then because of the 200, the watchers that were supposed to not get involved in the experiment, they basically curse bonded themselves to that soul and then join the human population. And then you see an inversion of the symbols of that soul with the worship of Baphomet, and then a bunch of evil rituals being done ultimately to stop the inevitable, right? Which is what they can't. And then that's all coded in all your science fiction movies. Even like an example of science fiction would be the virus movies. There's one with Tom Hanks called Inferno. And
Yeah,
then on the
Inferno.
license plate, it's 666P2 for P2 Freemasons, 666 for the biblical event and revealed in the book of Revelations, where it talks about the beast. The beast ultimately would be Satan's son, right? And then that's something you see depicted in these science fiction movies over and over again. Spider-Man, the lab monster, the lizard, the
The
man
lizard,
who
yeah.
creates himself, just that visual of that man-like lizard, and then the lab coat is a symbol for some of the extraterrestrial beings that have been working with humanity, and they're absent of emotional feeling. So they'll work with good guys and they'll work with bad guys, and it doesn't matter to them. They just want to achieve their desired end state, which is not being snuffed out of existence by the creator, because there's a path of souls. So they're aware that the creation is trying to perfect itself by what it manifests with grand, loving, and benevolence. So they want to move out of that emotionless state into something that has the capacity for emotional understanding. And that's a portion of the human experiment, right? Why Adam was brought into being. And then how that's working is because there's an absence of this high level of emotional intelligence in our local area at this time period. And then to facilitate a path of souls for all these different malevolent beings, it's allowed them to take over this experiment, splice themselves into us, and then who we will all become in the future, right? And then it's showing you that in the science fiction with these ascended super abilities, the X-Men, right? Like Generation X. Mutants, but they're not exactly mutants. They're just the star is activating the latent DNA, because light is a carrier of information. And then where they're having this human experiment is in this star system that ascends things, but we're in a hyper cycle where we're getting a ton of evolutionary information in a super short period of time. And then the lessons are crazy. So imagine all the different souls manifest are the many, they'll condense into the few. But ultimately, this intelligence field is this permanent but non-permanent thing where it comes out of this perfection, brings things into being, has a path of evolution that it intends on, but you condense as a life form. And that's like experienced as a series of a path of life for all, right? And then it culminates with the capacity for these clairvoyant abilities to dream the future, to have empathy, to have compassion, to have increased healing factor, right? To be able to do a natural form of teleportation, right? To transmute the body into pure light and then reach those heavenly realms is sort of the intent of what the creation does. But the literalness of it is sort of where people get a little bogged up. And then when you talk about this to a lot of religious people, they're in agreement with some of it, but you know, they don't want to imagine that their circumstances are this grievous, and that judgment in the last day is something that's so literal, right? But then they're showing you it with Dune
Yeah,
1 and
Dune.
2, right? They're explaining this story to you, and then they're having it like they're having it on an HBO series or something like that, but they're saying like tens of thousands of years ago, before, there's giving a setting and a continuity of events that led to this religious prophecy, and then ultimately the fulfillment of it, right? And then they show you uh, a similar sort of angelic form, right, around the prophet, and then of that story, they're showing you a black sort of interdimensional technology that could be the Kaaba, right? and ultimately they're using these religious themes, but then you always have to go at it with a grain of salt because you know there's a manipulation in it. And then the actors they use very often are the slaves, right? And then they're forced to do these satanic rituals. And then there's this whole adrenochrome thing, right? That's truly horrifying and super awful, but it's like real to, and these people get entangled into it, and as a soul they can't say no to this power because they're just stuck there, right? So there's a lot of that darkness that comes into watching in these shows and talking about it, right? So you have to make yourself aware, and it's kind of okay because you can't protect yourself from evil without understanding it,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, so like the Terminator
Mm-hmm.
is programming it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying, are we not supposed to be concerned? Should I say maybe in future when we'll have a whole lot of robots and then they come up to see humans as the threat to the ecosystem?
Yeah.
Is that not supposed to be a problem?
Well, for sure. For sure, it's something to be very concerned about, right? Because we're already seeing it. There's already been attacks of machines killing workers in factories with some sort of possibly malevolent intent, right? We are being forewarned with these movies, right? That's
Yes,
that's why
exactly.
Terminator's existing as a warning to you, and it's not just a science fiction standalone,
Yeah, and
right?
it came long before we started even thinking about the AI.
Exactly. I remember being, a child and watching that, and when I read Isaac Asimov, I'm thinking, okay, so Isaac Asimov is seeding us with iRobot in the 50s, right? And then Terminator is warning us about a really dark possibility, and then it has a time travel component to it, right? And then we're now seeing it with these humanoid robots being mass produced, and then they're building themselves. And then the people behind it masquerade as these good people, and look what they're doing.
Yeah.
But then they have so many billions of dollars when they could cure all of world hunger easily, right? They could revolutionarily change the nature of our civilization, but they don't. So that they're really not this great benevolent force that they're perpetrating themselves as, and they didn't come to that position naturally, meaning that they're getting help from these secret programs because they're being told the technologies to release and how to release them. So it's a very
like an advanced form of technology.
Yeah. They're coming from already this unseen, advanced form of technology that's simply sequestered down inside the earth or out in the star systems and not disclosed to the public. And then they're leading us along to this eventual disclosure. So, yeah, it's definitely something to be scared about. But then, as the children of Adam, we have the ability to 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 encapsulate and possess so much more power than what these technologies are, because it is happening inside the theater of the present moment, which is brought into existence by a creator, right?
Okay, so I think that was a really great, talk. I believe you're really going to inspire a whole lot of people, your viewers. You're really going to, pass across some I'll classify them as hidden knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think you're really doing great. And
thanks, brother.
thanks for having me on your show. It was
For
a
sure,
pleasure.
bro.
And
Thank you. And thanks for everyone for tuning in.
watching.